Welcome to Valley High School. Today is Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. We're in the library with special guests Elizabeth Sherry Swindler and John Calmy. They are alumni of Valley High School and graduated in the 1940s. Today we're doing a conversational interview with our guest.
I am Diamond Edwards. I'm the president of this class.
I am William Wiley and I'm senior vice president. We are seniors here at Valley High School and we are part of the class of 2020. Ms. Swindler and Mr. Calmy, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Elizabeth Cherry Swindler.
I was known as Johnny Elmer Calmy at Cosmosdale, and I think I dropped the Elmer when I came to Valley, and so I guess I was just John Calmy most of the way, and I graduated in '42.
If you'd just like to give a brief introduction of your career and your life after Valley and what influenced your life.
Shall I go first?
Ladies first.
Okay, I went to college for 2 years at Wittenberg College in Springfield, Ohio after I graduated from Valley. And my husband came home from the Navy after 2 years in Bougainville in the Solomon Islands, and we married. And after about 6 years, they were sweeping the sidewalk for teachers, and so I went back to school and I became a teacher. I taught in the barns behind Valley High, 5th grade, and then I taught at Valley Elementary, and then I taught at Stewart Middle School. And I married, we were married 70 years. My husband passed away 4 years ago. Mr. Calvin?
I was born on a farm on Ralph Avenue. My father moved to Cosmosdale in 1933, so he was there in time for the flood. I think he and my mother had a big influence on what I continued doing, was showing cattle at the fairs and trying to develop a little improved breed of dairy cattle for those who were involved in dairying. My father was in World War I, was one of the lucky ones. He survived the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Married my mother in 1920, I think it was, and between he and my mother and Mr. Shirley Anderson contributed much to my interest in agriculture. And he was just an exceptional county agent that just took personal interest in everyone, and that with all of those helping me in my early years contributed much to my following through.
Alright. Okay, so we have some questions for you. My first question is, what was it like when you were going to school here? Like the environment, the community, what it was like walking down the hallways?
Well, in my graduating class there were 70 students, so we weren't overcrowded. But we had some wonderful teachers, and we had caring teachers, and it was a very rural community. There were houses across the street and Neil's grocery store, and we always went to the grocery store because we arrived at school early. I caught the bus at 6:30. I lived almost to the county line, Algonquin Parkway, so we drove all the way from that area to the high school, and we were there early, and we would go over to Neil's, and they always let us enjoy them. They were very kind to us. The school was a group of caring teachers, and we all had a great time.
I guess I remember vividly about some of the students. I never did go across the street very much. It was much safer then to cross Dixie Highway than it is now. Now, we didn't have stoplights, traffic lights then. I think there was maybe one at St. Helens, but now there's you can't get started until you get to another traffic light. So that's a big difference in coming to school here. When I was here, I'm like Ms. Sherry. I think we all benefited by having exceptionally strong disciplinarian school teachers. You didn't want to do bad things. You wanted to follow their instructions, and that helped make study a lot easier because there was not distractions taking you away from what you needed to be doing. I guess in addition to some of the teachers, I think benefited getting to know the janitor, who was Mr. Powell. He was a veteran of World War I, same as my father, and he walked with a limp. He kind of had to. He was injured in the war, and we'd go down and visit with him when we weren't busy in class, and he would tell us a lot of his experiences, and also he was a humorous fella. He just was. You enjoyed being with him, around him, and you didn't think a thing of trying to help him. The old boiler was hanging fire, and you didn't mind going down and helping him fire the boiler, or helping him any way you could. And so I just had some good experiences here at Valley.
I think one thing I could add, Dixie Highway had 2 lanes. This was before they were building that. Well, we were in school, but when I first started, there were only 2 lanes. And back to the discipline, Mr. Brown was our principal, and at the old entrance, he stood every morning watching us come into the building, and when we walked into the building, we were very quiet. We didn't say very much. And also another thing, my husband often talked about the gun club at Valley High, and how the students would walk with their guns down the hall, and so of course that would not be true today.
What was it like in the neighborhoods in the area around Valley when you attended, and how has it kind of changed since then?
Well, it was very rural on the valley, on this side of the highway. My husband lived next door to Valley High, and his barn was between his house and the school, and he would, I think, hear the first bell, and he would run through the barn and get to class. And I think there were 8 houses on the west side of the Dixie Highway, and now of course it has developed so. And we lived at the second house after we married, and now it's the funeral home is there. It's very, very built up.
Well, I lived close to the Cosmos cement plant. In fact, just within walking distance. And there was a lot of the students at Cosmosdale, their parents worked at the cement plant. So we had a kind of a mix of rural and factory workers, but everyone first thing when we started the day here at Valley was a chapel service, and the entire community was very supportive of churches, and I think that contributed a lot to the benefit to the community, and made a strong community that tried to help one another. You know, we started out when there was not money for everything. There was money was in short supply. The wages we think about now, some people were working for $1 a day, not an hour, but a day, and that was more or less laborers. And so things have changed in that regard, but when you didn't have a lot, it was more incentive to try to work together with neighbors and try to help one another as best you could.
I wanted to add that at that time, there were two school systems, the Louisville school system and the Jefferson County school system. And in Louisville, you had male and manual for the fellas, and you had Louisville Girls High and Shawnee for the girls. And then they had St. X for the Catholic school and Presentation for the girls. And in Jefferson County, there were 4 high schools: Fern Creek, Valley, Eastern, and J-Town, I think, were the 4. And there are quite a few differences in the makeup now. Of course, they have combined the 2 systems, and they have a lot of schools.
Do you think the growth of Valley Station is a good thing or a bad thing, and are you surprised about it?
You answer that.
What was the question?
The growth of Valley Station and like the area surrounding Valley, are you surprised that it happened, and do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Was I surprised?
Yes, that like it went from rural to...
Well, I guess really not, because in the prime location, and when Dixie Highway was widened to 4 lanes, and well, actually it was in preparation of World War II when they needed a better road access for Fort Knox and all, and so I don't know whether anybody anticipated it, but it just happened, I guess, due to the proximity. And there used to be nothing hardly but a few stores and the different farms. I don't think there was the only car dealership, as I recall then, was Whipple Motors on Burnham Avenue on in towards Louisville, in from Shively. And there was one Bank of St. Helens, and so
just progress.
What were the big things going on in the world at the time you were in high school? Like, what was going on in the world around you, the community around you?
Well, of course, World War I had begun in 1941. World War II, I'm sorry, and so it influenced everything. I remember I had Mr. Paul O'Neill for my history teacher, and every day when we went to class, he drew a map of the Aleutian Islands on the board, and we became very familiar with the Aleutian Islands. But it was very traumatic because of many of our older friends had to go to war. That was the big influence.
Well, my class, I guess the classes right before us were a little more mature. They probably was involved a little more in some of the, but I guess I wish I'd have track of all those who served, but most all of them went into service, into military service. Some in more active service than others, and World War II changed many a life, and I know our class president, you were the president, was Steve Wilkerson. He was he just had what you call walking around sense. I mean, Steve he didn't have to do a lot of studying to come up with good answers, and I'm sure that helped him through his military service. But he went in. He grew up on a farm similar to myself. His uncle, Steve's father, had died when he was young. I don't remember what age, but he had two brothers, Ben and George, and Steve was the youngest, and they lived with Mr. Basie, who did all kind of custom work on farms throughout the community, and Steve lived with him and worked with him on the different farms, and but he was a fighter pilot in World War II, made it through the war, stayed in the reserve, was called up during the Berlin crisis, and flew, I think, 30 or maybe 31 or 2 missions, flying supplies into Berlin to keep them, to help them survive. And so that was kind of, I guess I kept closer touch with Steve than any of the other classmates.
Since you've been with us today and you've kind of walked around Valley a little, what are some of the biggest changes you've noticed about Valley High School?
The absence of the pool and the building of that gorgeous gym, and of course how much it has grown. When they wanted to enlarge, they wanted some more property for the parking, and my father-in-law was very upset because they took the property for a parking lot, and it was eminent domain that they were allowed to take this property, and he was very upset about that. And I just think the building has enlarged so that I would get lost there very easily now.
I guess I'm pretty much in agreement. The only thing I would add that is I haven't been in the nice auditorium, but I understand it's a very upscale, that's a wonderful place. When we had the senior play in '42, I think it was still under reconstruction, the gym.
Okay. What was Valley's community like when you were in school in the area around Valley? And what did people in the community think about Valley?
They were very community minded. They encouraged people. When Mr. Brown went to the service of the principal, the woman that took his place, Julia Fay, lived across the street, and everybody seemed to be really helpful.
I guess I remember it's pretty much similar. It was a very close-knit, supportive community, and like I mentioned earlier, when we'd experienced not having a whole lot to whatever to brag about or whatnot, everybody just was on the pretty much same level, tried to help one another, and very cooperating, civic-minded community.
What was the like student atmosphere like? Like, what was it at like sporting events, and like what was the school spirit like at the time? How did people think Valley, like their impression?
Well, we thought we were really school spirited. we came to the ball games. We supported all the ball games and all of the activities. We were pretty close knit. I think partially because we were such a small student body. I mean, everybody knew everybody else.
What was that question again? I should have hearing aids, but I don't.
What was it like at sporting events and like the school spirit? How was the school spirit overall, and how did students like view Valley?
I think in the book that was prepared is a pretty good example of forgotten the gentleman who was the announcer at the games. There was a torrential rainfall, and so I've forgotten. It's real interesting in there. If you have a chance to look through that book and see how he brought, how he just made everyone welcome, even with a bad rainstorm, and cheered the school right on through. It's interesting if you look that up sometime.
As you look back at your life through the years, what do you consider some of your greatest achievements?
Well, I guess my family and my I like teaching. I've taught for 21 years. I like that, and I'm wordless now.
I don't know how much much influence I had over achieving any of these, but I was blessed with an excellent family. One of my daughters is here, brought me down here. I'm not driving now. And she and her sister, who were both school teachers in Shelby County, one at East Middle and one at West Middle, and then my son, he started out at Center College. The second year he decided to transfer to UK and study agriculture. I guess he got stuck with the family background of being farmers, and so he decided to come back, finish in agriculture, and come back to the farm. So he was very successful in. He was on the board of directors of the National Holstein Association for 6 years, and helped a lot in that. I guess what I was fortunate enough to be able to serve on the state ASC committee for 10 years. Well, actually 11, because I served 1 year in 75, I guess it was, and then went on in 90 and served throughout. 80, served throughout the 80s, and that was a wonderful experience, and so had a lot of good blessings through the years.
I have 2 daughters, and the older daughter graduated from Valley High in 1965, and she became a teacher in Nashville, and she taught for many years. She is still an adjunct professor at David Lipscomb College, and she has students that she helps. And then I have Becky, and Becky graduated in 1965, and she is a Methodist minister, and she was retired, and now she has gone back to serving as an interim pastor. So we were blessed.
And may I add something? I think I left out my wife, who was
Don't leave her out.
a school teacher until she married me, and then she just helped me. So she was a very important part of my life. So I sure didn't want to leave that out.
If you could think of one negative thing that's impacted society since you graduated, what is it, and how would you change it?
Well, the thing I worry about is climate change. I think that we all need to work toward doing something to about that. And then I think the gun problem is very, very worrisome. And I don't know what to do about that either.
I guess the thing that I sympathize with everybody, and especially young people, is this drug trafficking. I was telling Janet on the news in the last day or two, there was a fellow that had sold some heroin to a young man, a young person, that killed him. What was his penalty? 10 years in jail. And I feel sorry for all the young people who have to experience this pressure due to the money that somebody's making off of people suffering in order to this vaping. It just so I just don't think we can have strict enough laws to try to do something about cutting back on the pressure that money puts on young people to make a profit off of illegitimate drugs, and causes a lot of these killings and all.
What are some positive things you see happen to society that had good impacts?
I think the young people today are just wonderful. I really do. I just really marvel at all the knowledge that you have and the ability to do computers. I don't even have a computer, but you seem to be so interested and interesting.
Who in your lifetime, whether it's someone you know personally or someone that you've never met before in your life, has made the greatest amount of change in the world, and why would you say they made that amount of change?
Of course, I think Franklin Roosevelt with his programs for the older people, and I think Lyndon Johnson's with his I just think they're. I just think that they're two very influential presidents and helped.
I guess one of my favorites is President Roosevelt, and the other one is Dwight Eisenhower. And I think they both were extremely talented in work getting people. As you all know, one was on the one side of the aisle, and the other's on the other side of the aisle. But still, back then, there was civility in government where people worked together for the common good, and which possibly we can have a little more of that today.
Is something you did when you were a kid or something you experienced when you were a kid that kids now just don't get that you wish they did?
Well, I wish they could get outside and do more things that are more, instead of sticking with something in their hand, a computer or a phone or something all the time. I think they can get out and play, and well, that's my thing.
I experienced, I guess I'd have been a better student had it not have been wanting to get back home and get outside and help do something. And I think that young people could benefit by some getting out in the community and finding some example. John Terry Smith, I think, was in.
He was behind me 2 years.
44, I think, wasn't he?
I think so.
And was a neighbor of ours down at Cosmosdale. And during the war, it was awfully hard to get help to pick up potatoes. You had this digger that lifted them out of the ground and shook all of the dirt off, and then laid them on top of the ground, but you had to go along and pick them up and put them in a bushel basket. And he remembered, when I talked to him the other day, he remembered going from our place at Cosmosdale up to the farm that's now in Stanford Field, and to pick up potatoes. And I think that benefited both of us to get out. And I don't know, Steve, our class president, he went home a lot of afternoons and helped his uncle on the farm. And I think that hands-on experience is very helpful in numerous ways.
What is something that kids have now or experience now that you wish you could have as a kid?
I guess I have mixed feelings. I asked a question, and Mr. Wade pulled it up here just right away. I think we had to do a little more digging back then. It made us think a little more, maybe, than having someone give us all of the answers right like that. So I think in some respects, yes, that would have been wonderful, but I don't know.
I think this is our last question. Do you have any advice for our generation?
Well, number one, love God, love your family, and love your friends. And I think love is the big thing.
Right on target, and I would only add that I don't know, we had a little ruler. I don't know whether you had one, Elizabeth, the little Coca-Cola ruler.
Sure. Have one of my desks still.
That and I'm going to change the wording just a little bit. Do for others as you would have others do for you. And because some people kind of made a little joke out of that, but anyhow, that's the reason I changed it to for. In other words, something to help others, and but also naturally, above all else, have faith and trust in God Almighty.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, or any questions you'd like to ask anyone in here?
No. Thank you.
What was your question?
Is there anything final, like closing remarks, or anything you want to say, or is there any questions that you'd like to ask any of the students in here?
I just admire all of you all very much. You're very bright and you're very helpful, and you know what you're doing.
You've been well organized. It seems like everything you put in place well, and I'm sure the experience is beneficial. Question: some of you going to be a radio announcer?
They're going to be on stage. They're going to be actors and actresses.
Well, anyhow, these are all good formative years, and apparently you have some wonderful teachers to help you. So that's.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us.